Hello and a very warm welcome to this limited 3-part mini podcast series, 5 years of World AD Day, kindly sponsored by Sanofi and Regeneron in support of the AD community. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Siân Jones. As a TV presenter and a broadcaster and facilitator, it is wonderful to be here. I'm also delighted to say that I'm joined today by Professor Stephan Weidinger, who is Professor of Dermatology at the Christian Albrechts University and Vice Head of the Department of Dermatology and Allergy at the University Hospital Schleswig-Holstein. Professor, it is wonderful to see you. Just tell us a little bit about your background and your work.
Yeah, so I'm a dermatologist and allergist, and I have a long-standing interest in atopic dermatitis, both as a clinician and as a researcher. In fact, the first time I dealt with atopic dermatitis was in my thesis, and that was back in the 1990s. When I analyzed and investigated the effects of Staphylococcus aureus on the skin, and this microbe is an important trigger factor of atopic dermatitis. And since then, I have been taking care of AD patients for almost 20 years, and I'm still learning.
Absolutely. Well, that's a fantastic background. Now, we know, though, across this podcast series, we're going to be exploring patient care and management of atopic dermatitis, past, present and future. And in this episode, we're going to be setting the scene, exploring the creation of World Atopic Dermatitis Day 5 years ago, as well as looking at the unmet need and burden of disease which persists in the AD community. And in episode 2, we'll be looking at the importance of disease awareness and the necessity for multidisciplinary care. And then finally, we're going to be wrapping up with a look ahead to the future and discussing what the AD community should be striving to change in the next 5 years. And I should say that World Atopic Dermatitis Day is a collaboration between the Sanofi Regeneron Alliance and Global Skin, which first took place back in September 2018. The objective of this hugely important global awareness event aims to give a voice to patients, caregivers and their families to further understand the true burden of atopic dermatitis. Now, Professor Weidinger, we know, of course, that the AD community comes together on this really special day, September the 14th, to raise awareness of the disease. It's something you've been involved with for years, but of course, it's a hugely significant day, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because atopic dermatitis is still a very much underappreciated disease. And I think it's really important that the disease is recognized as a chronic and serious illness that affects millions of patients of all age groups across the world. And that confers a huge burden not only to the patients, but also to the caregivers and families, and in the end, to societies. The World AD Day was founded, as you said, 5 years ago through an initiative of patient organizations as a campaign to support increasing the awareness for the disease and illuminating the complexities of the disease, and in the end to help improve care for atopic dermatitis. The World AD Day every year focuses on different topics, and this year we take a look at the 5 major burdens of the disease, and this is the burden of extreme itch and pain, the burden of on families and caregivers, the burden on finances, the burden on mental health, and then the burden of daily management. And I think that such global awareness campaigns are really very important to put a spotlight on the needs of the patients and the needs for improved support, management and for more support for the patients.
So that's interesting that those 5 burdens are under the spotlight this year. This is the first time they've been highlighted. Why is that? Is it just as World AD Day develops?
Yes, it has become clear over the past years that there's not sufficient awareness about the multidimensionality of the disease burden, and that it is important to campaign on this.
Absolutely. And so this is a hugely important day, isn't it? What would you say the impact has been on the AD community over this time over the period of the 5 years, and of course focusing on the day itself?
I think that this campaign and the World AD Day definitely has helped to increase awareness for AD as a serious disease that deserves support and more and improved care models. It has helped to join forces and also involve patients. As I said before, it was originally driven also by patient organizations, so it has helped to give patients a voice. My impression is it has attracted quite a lot of interest in the public and hopefully also by policymakers.
Absolutely, and I know that's something we will go on to discuss, but the importance is absolutely clear. But I've got to ask the question, you know, all of this over the last 5 years, we read a lot about it, but why would you say awareness is still needed?
Well, first of all, I would say simply because it's such a common disease. Many people underestimate that. So the point prevalence of atopic dermatitis is up to 10% in children and 5% in adults. So many individuals are affected by this disease. And then there are still so many misconceptions about the disease around that in the end contribute to the deprioritization in favor of services that are deemed more medically urgent. And I think we need an increased awareness to highlight the burden and the need for more investments into improved patient care.
Absolutely, because you know, you mention atopic dermatitis and many people think that it just affects children, but that's really not the case.
No, so it typically manifests early in life. So it is a disease that very often starts in infancy. It's a lifelong condition. It might have, it does have a lot of variability over time, but in the end, it's a lifelong condition and needs long-term management strategies.
Absolutely. I was interested in the conversation that we were having before the podcast started about the fact that will we ever see a day when it's wiped out altogether?
That would be great, but I don't think that this will happen, at least not in the near future. But after many years of little advances, we are now making a lot of progress. So in the past years, we have seen the introduction of highly innovative, effective and safe treatments. So I would say we have reached a point where we can tell patients that we have a good chance to control the disease also on the long run. So that is different from a few years ago.
Absolutely.
And also through initiatives like the World AD Day, we finally see an increased awareness for the disease across different stakeholders, and that is great.
And let's talk about the people that it affects. You know, we're talking about infants, adolescents and adults. In your experience, though, from what you see in Germany, what do you see as the key unmet needs for those three groups?
I think for the kids, it's important that we support them in the daily management. So they are more focused on the here and now and to develop coping strategies. Parents and families are often worried about the long-term consequences of the disease. So it's important to explain to them that we can effectively manage the disease and they should not worry too much about the future. And the adolescents are a particularly difficult group because this is a difficult period in life. So they sometimes need more psychological support, really.
Absolutely. So the mental health burden itself, you know, is often not talked about, not realised, and rather underestimated, isn't it? Let's take a dive into that.
Yeah, it is. So atopic dermatitis definitely is more than just a skin disease, and this is probably because it not only has what we call clinical signs, so the eczema lesions. It has a lot of symptoms, in particular the itch, but also skin pain. And then we have that often lifelong but unpredictable course that causes a lot of uncertainty to the patients. And together, the disease in the end has quite big mental health burden. And that burden includes different aspects. So there is the sleep disturbance that many patients suffer from, and very often not only the patients but also the family members. Then patients are sometimes stigmatized I hear quite often from patients that they suffer from low self-esteem, that they sometimes even feel something like guilt. They feel ashamed. Then we have that social isolation aspect that we see in many patients. Definitely the disease causes emotional distress and mood changes. So in the end, it's really multidimensional impact the disease has on mental health. And that is something we need to consider.
Absolutely, because all of those aspects together are really disturbing and really very difficult to manage, aren't they? So can you give us an example of some of your patients that come in, how it's affecting, for example, their ability maybe to go into work on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, so that reduced work and school productivity is a major problem, but it's more than that. So it's AD really affects every aspect of patients' lives, and it's also a lot about daily activities that are impaired. So many patients tell me, at least until we were able to manage the disease in these patients, that they had difficulties in doing sports, in wearing clothes they would like to wear. So it really is a disease that is constantly there for the patients and dominates almost their life. And this is why it's so important to develop management strategies that control the disease and to get over these many limitations.
Absolutely. So we've talked there about the impact it can have on the patient's day-to-day life, but I know that you've been involved in a survey that's recently come out, which has been hugely enlightening, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's, I think what you mean is the Atopic Dermatitis Global Adolescent and Pediatric Survey, the AD GAP study. And that was a very interesting study that has helped to work out the impact, the burden of the disease on patients of different age groups and their caregivers. So that was a survey done on kids and teenagers with moderate to severe atopic dermatitis, their parents and caregivers, and their treating physicians. And it was done in 13 countries across 4 continents. In the end, there were more than 4,000 participants. And the aim was to assess the full impact of the disease on the patients and also the perspectives about the disease of these different groups that I mentioned.
Absolutely.
And there were many interesting findings from that survey.
Yeah, and this survey, is it the first of its kind or the first for a good number of years?
To my knowledge, it's the first of its kind. Really.
Yes, yes. Right. So that painted a really clear picture then.
Yeah.
So what will happen to all that information, that data? Obviously, it goes to shape the future of treatments and holistic care.
Well, we have started as scientists to summarize the results for scientific publications, but we would also like to use the findings to engage with policymakers so that they better understand the impact the disease has, not only on the patients, but also the environment, so the families, caregivers. So in order to make them invest more into this disease.
Mm-hmm. So it must have a huge impact. So tell us about some of the examples, some of the things that came out of the survey that were maybe shocking, maybe surprising.
I wouldn't say shocking, but interesting. Let's say interesting. So the impact of the disease on sleep and the psychosocial effects, they were in fact ranked as the most burdensome by the patients. The physicians themselves, they acknowledge apparently the discomfort of AD, but they underestimate the impact of disturbed sleep and the impact of daily activities. And also treatment relief waning over time was ranked by patients and their caregivers as one of the top, if most important aspects of the disease, but physicians didn't include that at all. So that demonstrates that different groups involved in AD care have different views on the disease.
Absolutely, so hugely valuable. Okay, thank you so much for now for your insights, Professor. So from what we've discussed, it's really obvious that continued education for stakeholders across the healthcare system really is needed to make sure that patients' needs are met, not only in terms of treatment, but also in offering mental health support. And it really does feel, that addressing that mental health burden patients suffer has to be an absolute priority moving forward. Professor, thank you very much once again. So stay tuned for the next episode where Professor Weidinger and I discuss the importance of multidisciplinary and holistic care and how this could improve patient outcomes. Bye-bye for now.